The Harlem Renaissance. Between World War I and the Great Depression, two of America's most devastating events, an important cultural movement began to evolve in the heart of New York City. Beginning about 1920, it was called the Harlem Renaissance. Its name reveals its similarity to the European Renaissance, a golden age of art and literature during the 14th to 16th centuries. During this European Renaissance, geniuses like William Shakespeare and Leonardo da Vinci led the Western world out of the darkness in the Middle Ages. The Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s also gave rise to a group of highly talented artists. The resemblance ends there, however. The Harlem Renaissance owed little to European influenced cultures or the dominant culture of early 20th century America. Instead, this artistic awakening was created exclusively by African Americans, and it occurred at the perfect time. The power of hope. In 1920, America was ripe for change. It needed a renewal of hope. World War I had cost more than $32 billion, and more than 100,000 American soldiers had been killed or wounded. Despite the continuing existence of racism in much of America, thousands of African Americans had served their country in the war. When the war ended, these soldiers returned to an America where social injustice was still tolerated and jobs were difficult to find. Many African Americans looked northward for the chance to rebuild their lives. It was a trend that had begun after the Civil War, when newly freed Southern slaves had moved north, hungering for opportunity. After World War I, African Americans again gravitated to the larger northern cities. Harlem, a large neighborhood in New York City, appeared to offer the kind of fresh start they were seeking. In fact, by the early 1920s, African Americans in Harlem had grown into a large but closely knit community. Conditions were not ideal, but the African American residents of Harlem shared a similar cultural, social, and artistic values. Among the thousands attracted to the possibilities of Harlem was a select group of highly gifted artists who turned this former Dutch village into a hub of creativity. A new sound emerges. It was called jazz, and no one had ever heard anything like it. A blend of traditional African rhythms, gospel, and blues, this new musical style was completely original. Not only did jazz express the African American experience, but its fluid, free-form nature also encouraged musicians to improvise and express themselves. Though jazz originated in New Orleans, its irresistible sound had made its way to New York's Harlem. Jazz could be heard everywhere, from street corners to nightclubs. It was in these clubs that the most accomplished jazz musicians got their start. Louis Armstrong, Cab Calloway, and many others became legends. Soulful jazz singers like Billie Holiday and Bessie Smith were instant celebrities. Harlem's finest musicians soon helped make jazz an international sensation. Literature and art abound. Despite the powerful influence of jazz, the foundation of the Harlem Renaissance was not made from music alone. African American writers such as Ralph Ellison and Zora Neale Hurston provided their own observations of African American life. They challenged others to examine prejudice and its damage to society and individuals. The words of gifted poets Langston Hughes and Countee Cullen revealed the complex and contradictory world of the African American experience, with all its joys and injustices. Meanwhile, the talented painter Jacob Lawrence, opera singer Marian Anderson, jazz singer Josephine Baker, and scores of actors, sculptors, and playwrights made timeless contributions to the vision shaping the Harlem Renaissance. A beginning, not an end. The convergence of talent that spontaneously came together during the Harlem Renaissance was nothing short of amazing. These gifted artists arrived in Harlem looking for hope, and what resulted was the blossoming of a new African American identity. The Harlem Renaissance began to decline in the late 1930s when the Great Depression crushed the nation's economy. This sent most Americans into crisis, and time spent creating turned into time spent surviving. The heritage of the Harlem Renaissance is alive and well, however. The vision of its participants is a permanent part of our collective American culture. Their music, words, and art seem as fresh and powerful today in the 21st century as they were then. Perhaps the most important achievement of the Harlem Renaissance is the enduring knowledge that all citizens are entitled to a chance at greatness. Whenever such opportunities have flourished, the world's supply of cultural treasures has also grown. The Harlem Renaissance was one of America's shining moments.